The gunshot cracked through the winter air as Harper Simmons fled through knee-deep snow, her breath coming in ragged gasps that formed clouds in the frigid January morning of 1885. Prescott, Arizona rarely saw snow this deep, but the blizzard that had swept through the territory 3 days prior had transformed the normally arid landscape into a treacherous white wilderness perfect for concealing tracks, but terrible for a woman running for her life. Harper. Elijah's voice boomed behind her, carrying over the snow-covered pines. You think you can run from me? There ain't nowhere in this territory you can hide. Harper's legs burned with exhaustion as she pushed forward, her wool dress heavy with moisture and sweat despite the cold. The bruises on her face were still fresh from the previous night, when Elijah had finally revealed his true nature, the charming facade he'd maintained in town completely dissolved in the privacy of their remote cabin. 6 months of marriage, she whispered to herself, the words tasting like bile. 6 months of lies. She'd been just 19 when Elijah Simmons had arrived in Prescott with his smooth talk and promises of a comfortable life. Now, at 20, Harper was fighting to survive the worst mistake of her life. Another gunshot pierced the air, closer this time. Harper ducked instinctively, losing her footing and tumbling down an embankment. She landed hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. For a moment she lay still, the world silent except for the soft fall of snow and her thundering heartbeat. Then she forced herself up, ignoring the pain shooting through her ankle. I see you down there, Elijah called. Harper, you made vows before God and man. Till death do us part, remember. The way he emphasized death sent a chill through Harper that had nothing to do with the snow. She scrambled to her feet, limping now but desperate to put distance between herself and the man who had once promised to cherish her. She hadn't planned to run. Not really. But when Elijah had passed out drunk after beating her, something inside Harper had finally snapped. She'd packed a small bag, taken what little money she could find, and slipped out into the snowstorm. Her plan had been simple: make it to town, find help, maybe even catch the eastbound train. But Elijah had woken sooner than expected. The trees began to thin, and Harper realized with growing horror that she was approaching the edge of the forest. Beyond lay open meadow, no cover, nowhere to hide. She hesitated, glancing back toward the sound of Elijah's approaching footsteps, then toward the exposed whiteness ahead. No choice. She pushed forward, praying the increasing snowfall would obscure her tracks. The meadow stretched before her, a vast expanse of white broken only by the distant silhouette of what appeared to be a cabin. Smoke curled from its chimney, a beacon of hope in the desolate landscape. Harper set her sights on it and pushed forward with renewed determination. Behind her, Elijah emerged from the tree line. I see you, wife, he bellowed. Running to another man's homestead won't save you. Harper didn't look back. Her lungs burned, her ankle throbbed, but the cabin grew larger with each painful step. 50 yards, 40, 30, a shot rang out and snow kicked up just feet from where she ran. Harper couldn't help the scream that escaped her lips. 20 yards, 10. Help, she called, her voice hoarse. Please help me. The cabin door swung open and a tall figure emerged, rifle in hand. Harper stumbled forward, collapsing at the foot of the porch steps. Please, she gasped, looking up at the stranger. He's going to kill me. The man, broad-shouldered and bearded, took in her bruised face with a single glance before stepping past her, rifle raised toward Elijah, who was now approaching at a run. That's far enough, the stranger called, his voice deep and steady. The lady doesn't seem keen on your company. Elijah slowed, his own pistol still in hand but pointed downward. That's my wife you're harboring, mister. This is a private matter between a husband and his disobedient spouse. Don't see how a man chasing a woman through the snow with a gun could be considered private, the stranger replied calmly. Or civilized. Harper struggled to her feet, positioning herself behind her unexpected protector. Now that she was closer, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 25 or 26. His eyes were the color of the sky after a storm, and they hadn't left Elijah for a moment. "Name's Reese Callahan," he said, still addressing Elijah. "And you're trespassing on my property." "That woman is my property," Elijah snarled. "Harper, get over here now." Harper shrank back. "I'm not going with you, Elijah, not ever again." Elijah's face twisted with rage. "You made vows. Vows don't mean much when one party's being beaten half to death," Reese cut in, his voice hardening. "Now I suggest you turn around and head back where you came from. Or what, you'll shoot me. For claiming what's rightfully mine." Reese didn't flinch. "She's not yours. She's her own person. And yes, if you take one step closer, I'll consider it a threat to both her safety and mine." For a tense moment, the only sound was the whisper of falling snow. Harper held her breath, watching Elijah's face contort as he weighed his options. Finally, he spat on the ground. "This isn't over." His eyes found Harper's. "I'll be back for you." "She's mine now," Reese said quietly. "And if you come back, you'd better bring the sheriff with you, though I doubt he'd take kindly to a man who beats his wife." Elijah's knuckles whitened around his pistol, but he didn't raise it. After a moment more of silent fury, he holstered the weapon and backed away. "You'll regret this," he called. "Both of you." Neither Harper nor Reese moved until Elijah had disappeared back into the tree line. Only when he was completely out of sight did Reese lower his rifle and turn to Harper. "Let's get you inside, madam. You look half frozen." Harper nodded, suddenly aware of how violently she was shaking. Whether from cold, fear, or relief, she couldn't tell. "Thank you," she whispered as he helped her up the porch steps. "I didn't know where else to go." Reese's expression softened. "No need for thanks. No decent man would do otherwise." The cabin was warm, heated by a crackling fire and a stone hearth. It was a simple space, one main room with a small table, 2 chairs, a bed in the corner, and various supplies arranged neatly along the walls. A small doorway led to what appeared to be a storeroom in the back. "It's not much," Reese said, gesturing for her to sit by the fire. "But it's dry and warm." Harper sank gratefully onto a wooden chair, extending her hands toward the flames. "It's perfect." Reese set his rifle in a rack by the door and moved to a pot hanging near the fire. "Got some stew? You look like you could use something hot." As he ladled the savory-smelling mixture into a bowl, Harper studied him surreptitiously. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to taking care of himself. His clothes were worn but clean, and despite the rugged beard, she could tell he was handsome in a rough-hewn way. "You're not from around here," she observed as he handed her the bowl. "Montana originally," he replied, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Been in Arizona territory about 3 years now." He sat in the chair opposite her. "I don't get many visitors out here, especially not in weather like this." Harper blew on a spoonful of stew. "I'm sorry to impose." "You're not imposing. I'm just sorry about the circumstances." His gaze flickered to the bruises on her face, but he didn't comment on them. "How long have you been married to that man?" 6 months, Harper replied, her appetite suddenly diminished despite the delicious smell of the stew. "We were married in July. He wasn't like this at first. Or maybe he was and I just didn't see it." Reese nodded, his expression grave. "Men like that are good at hiding their true nature until they have what they want. You know, men like Elijah. I've met my share." He sipped his coffee. "What's your plan now, Mrs. Simmons? Harper Simmons." She set the bowl on her lap. "And I don't have a plan. I didn't think beyond escaping the cabin. I thought maybe I could make it to town, find work somewhere." "Prescott's a 2-day ride in good weather," Reese said. "In this snow longer, and your husband will likely head there first to look for you." Harper's shoulders slumped. The reality of her situation was sinking in. She had no money, no transportation, and nowhere to go, and Elijah wouldn't give up easily. "You can stay here until the snow lets up," Reese offered. "I've got supplies enough, and that ankle of yours needs rest." Harper looked up, surprised. "I couldn't ask that of you. You've already risked enough on my behalf." Reese shrugged. "It's no trouble. I could use the company, truth be told. Gets quiet out here in winter." "Why do you live so far from town?" A shadow crossed his face. "Some men prefer solitude." There was a story there, Harper was certain, but she didn't press. They all had their secrets, their reasons for being where they were. "Thank you, Mr. Callahan. I accept your offer, at least until I can figure out what to do next. Just Reese is fine." Harper nodded, feeling a small smile form despite everything. Just Reese it is. That night, Harper slept in Reese's bed while he made a pallet for himself by the fire. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully. Every creaking board, every gust of wind against the cabin walls, had her starting awake, fearing Elijah had returned. Each time, she would see Reese's silhouette near the hearth, sometimes awake and adding wood to the fire, sometimes sleeping soundly, his rifle always within reach. Morning arrived with fresh snow and a sky the color of polished steel. Harper woke to find Reese already up, frying bacon in a cast-iron skillet. "Morning," he said when he noticed her stirring. "How's the ankle?" Harper carefully rotated her foot. "Better, I think, still sore." "Good. There's water heated if you want to wash up." Harper appreciated his thoughtfulness. Using the basin of warm water he'd prepared, she did her best to make herself presentable, combing her fingers through her tangled chestnut hair and washing her face. The bruise on her cheek had darkened overnight, and there was no hiding it, but at least she felt cleaner. Over breakfast, Reese explained his usual routine, checking trap lines, tending to his 2 horses in the small stable behind the cabin, hunting when necessary. "I'll stay close today," he assured her. "Your husband struck me as the persistent type." "He is," Harper confirmed. "Elijah doesn't let go of what he considers his." "Well, he'll have to learn. You're not a possession." The matter-of-factness with which he said this warmed Harper more than the fire. How different he was from Elijah, who had started talking about a woman's place the moment they'd returned from their wedding. "May I help with something today?" she asked. "I'm not used to sitting idle." Reese considered this. "Can you cook?" Harper nodded. "My mother made sure I knew my way around a kitchen." "Good. I've got some mending that needs doing too if you're handy with a needle." "I am." "Then we'll divide the work. I need to check the horses and bring in more firewood anyway." The day passed in a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. While Reese worked outside, Harper busied herself with domestic tasks, mending shirts, preparing a more substantial stew than what Reese had made, and organizing the small pantry. The work kept her mind occupied, preventing her from dwelling too much on Elijah or what her future might hold. When Reese returned mid-afternoon, his arms full of firewood and cheeks ruddy from the cold, he stopped in the doorway, surveying the cabin. "Place hasn't looked this tidy since I built it," he remarked. Harper felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment. "It's the least I could do." They settled into a comfortable routine over the next few days. The snow continued to fall intermittently, making travel to town impossible even if it had been safe. Reese taught Harper about trapping and showed her how to skin and prepare the rabbits he caught. In turn, she cooked meals that were a significant improvement over his bachelor fare. They talked, too. Harper learned that Reese had come to Arizona after serving briefly as a cavalry scout. He'd saved enough money to buy this plot of land and built the cabin himself, preferring the quiet of the wilderness to the chaos of town. He sold furs in Prescott a few times a year and occasionally guided hunting parties when money was tight. Harper shared stories of her childhood in Missouri, her family's move west after her father died, and her mother's passing 2 years ago. She spoke little of Elijah, but Reese didn't press her. On the fourth night, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Reese finally asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. "How did you end up with a man like Elijah?" Harper stared into the flames, gathering her thoughts. "My mother died of consumption when I was 18. I had no other family, no skills beyond keeping house. I took in washing, mending, whatever work I could find to keep a roof over my head." She sighed. "When Elijah came to town last summer, he seemed like salvation. He was handsome, charming, and he had money, or so he claimed. He courted me properly, spoke of a fine house he was building. Everyone said I was lucky." Reese's jaw tightened. "And after the wedding, we moved to a cabin not nearly as fine as he'd promised. He started drinking more, gambling. The first time he hit me was a month after we were married. He apologized, swore it would never happen again." Harper gave a mirthless laugh. "It only got worse. By Christmas, I was afraid all the time." "Did no one in town notice? Try to help?" Harper shook her head. "We lived too far out, and Elijah was careful, never left marks where people could see. Besides, in the eyes of the law and the church, he has the right to discipline his wife as he sees fit." "That's not discipline," Reese said, his voice hard. "That's cruelty." "Yes." Harper met his gaze. "The night I ran, he was worse than ever. I thought he might kill me. When he finally passed out drunk, I knew it was my only chance." Reese was silent for a long moment. "You're safe here, Harper, for as long as you need." The sincerity in his voice brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "Thank you." They sat in companionable silence until the fire burned low. As Harper rose to go to bed, Reese cleared his throat. "The snow's starting to melt. In a day or two, the trail to town should be passable." Harper nodded, a knot forming in her stomach. She'd been avoiding thinking about what would happen when the weather cleared. "I could take you to Prescott," Reese continued, "or further if you'd prefer. Flagstaff, maybe, somewhere Elijah wouldn't think to look right away." "I have no money," Harper reminded him, "and no place to go. I've saved a bit, enough to see you settled somewhere safe." Harper stared at him, astonished. "Why would you do that for me? You barely know me." Reese looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "It's the right thing to do." "It's more than that," Harper said softly. "Most men wouldn't offer what you have. They'd have sent me on my way the moment the danger passed." Reese's gaze met hers, and something unspoken passed between them. "Get some rest, Harper. We don't need to decide anything tonight." The following morning, Harper woke to an empty cabin. Reese had left a note saying he'd gone to check his trap lines and would return by midday. Harper set about making breakfast, her mind turning over possibilities for her future. She could go to Prescott, try to find work as a housekeeper or laundress. But Elijah would surely look for her there. She could try for Flagstaff or even California, start fresh where no one knew her. But the thought of leaving Reese, brought a surprising ache to her chest. In just a few days, he had become important to her. His quiet strength, his kindness, the way he treated her with respect rather than as a possession, it was everything Elijah wasn't. Harper was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the approaching footsteps until the cabin door burst open. Elijah stood in the doorway, his face contorted with rage, pistol in hand. "Found you at last," he snarled. Harper backed away, reaching blindly for anything she could use as a weapon. "How did you followed your cowboy friend this morning?" Elijah said, stepping into the cabin and closing the door behind him. "Waited until he was far enough away." He looked around the cabin with disgust. Already playing house with him, I see. You didn't waste any time. It's not like that, Harper protested, though a part of her wished it was. He's just been kind to me. Kind, Elijah laughed. Men aren't kind to women unless they want something. He advanced toward her. Get your things, we're going home. No. Harper's voice was stronger than she expected. I'm not going anywhere with you. Elijah's face darkened. You don't have a choice. You're my wife. I'd rather die than go back to that cabin with you. That can be arranged, Elijah growled, raising his pistol. But not before I teach you what happens to unfaithful wives. Harper's back hit the wall. There was nowhere else to go. I've never been unfaithful. You ran to another man. I ran from you. The sound of a rifle being cocked froze them both. Harper looked past Elijah to see Reese standing in the doorway, his Winchester aimed squarely at Elijah's back. I thought I made myself clear the other day, Reese said, his voice cold. She's not going anywhere with you. Elijah turned slowly, keeping his pistol trained on Harper. This is between me and my wife. Stay out of it, cowboy. Harper, Reese said calmly, step away from him. Harper tried to edge along the wall, but Elijah grabbed her arm, yanking her against his chest and pressing the barrel of his pistol to her temple. Drop the rifle, Elijah demanded, or I'll put a bullet in her brain right now. Harper could feel Elijah's heart pounding against her back, his breath hot on her neck. She met Reese's eyes, saw the calculation there, the controlled fury. You won't shoot her, Reese said, not lowering his weapon. She's your ticket out of here. Elijah's grip tightened painfully. Maybe I don't care about getting out. Maybe I'd rather see her dead than with another man. I'm not with another man, Harper said through gritted teeth. I'm just trying to stay alive. Shut up, Elijah shook her roughly. I'm taking her with me, he said to Reese. And if you try to follow us, I'll kill her. Do you understand? Reese's expression remained impassive, but Harper could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his finger hovered near the trigger. Let her go, Reese said, and I'll let you walk out of here. Not a chance. Harper could feel Elijah beginning to edge toward the door, using her as a shield. Her mind raced. If Elijah got her out of the cabin, got her on a horse, there would be no escape. She had to do something now. In one swift motion, Harper slammed her heel down on Elijah's instep. He howled in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Harper to drive her elbow into his stomach. The pistol wavered away from her head. Down, Reese shouted. Harper dropped to the floor as the cabin filled with the deafening report of Reese's rifle. Elijah staggered backward, a look of surprise on his face as a red stain blossomed on his chest. He fired wildly, the bullet splintering wood somewhere above Harper's head. Then he collapsed, the pistol clattering to the floor beside him. For a moment, no one moved. The smell of gunpowder hung heavy in the air. Then Reese was at Harper's side, helping her to her feet, his eyes scanning her for injuries. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice rough. Harper shook her head, unable to speak, her gaze fixed on Elijah's still form. Blood pooled beneath him, soaking into the wooden floor. Is he? Reese knelt beside Elijah, checking for a pulse. After a moment, he looked up at Harper and nodded grimly. He's gone. Harper sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Relief, shock, and a strange grief swirled within her. She had never wished Elijah dead, despite everything, but she couldn't deny the overwhelming sense of freedom that washed over her. What do we do now? She whispered. Reese stood, setting his rifle aside. We need to go to the sheriff. Tell him what happened. Harper's eyes widened with fear. Will you be arrested? It was self-defense. He had a gun to your head. Reese's expression was grim but resolute. The sheriff in Prescott is a fair man. He'll understand. What if he doesn't? What if they hang you for killing a man over a domestic dispute? Reese knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Harper, look at me. We have to do this right. Running will only make us look guilty." Harper knew he was right, but the thought of Reese facing a noose because of her made her blood run cold. "This is my fault. If I hadn't come here, don't," Reese said firmly. "None of this is your fault. Elijah made his choices, I made mine." His thumbs traced gentle circles on the backs of her hands. "I don't regret helping you. Not for a second." The intensity in his blue eyes made Harper's heart skip. This man, who barely knew her, had risked everything to protect her. And she realized with sudden clarity that she would do the same for him. "When do we leave for town?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning. The snow's melted enough that we can make good time." Reese glanced at Elijah's body. "Tonight we'll take care of things." Harper nodded, understanding what he meant. They couldn't leave Elijah on the cabin floor overnight. Together, they wrapped Elijah's body in a spare blanket. Reese carried him outside to a small shed behind the cabin, where the frozen ground would keep the body until they could bring the sheriff back. That night, neither of them slept much. Harper sat by the fire, staring into the flames, while Reese cleaned his rifle and prepared for their journey to town. The cabin felt different with the knowledge of what had transpired there, as if the walls themselves held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. "Harper," Reese said softly, breaking the long silence, "whatever happens in Prescott, I want you to know that I meant what I said to Elijah that first day." Harper looked up at him questioningly. "When I said you were mine," Reese clarified, a faint color touching his cheeks. "I didn't mean it like he thought like you were property to be claimed. I meant that I'd protect you, that you had a place here if you wanted it." The simple declaration made Harper's throat tighten with emotion. I know it's too soon," Reese continued. "You're just free of one man. You don't need another making demands or expectations, but when this is all over," he hesitated, "I'd like you to consider staying, not as a house guest, as more." Harper crossed to where he sat and knelt before him, taking his rough hands in hers. "I've known you less than a week, Reese Callahan, but in that time you've shown me more kindness, more respect than Elijah did in 6 months." She smiled softly. "I don't know what the future holds, especially after today, but I know that when I think about where I want to be, it's here. With you." Reese's hands tightened around hers. "We barely know each other." "We have time to learn," Harper said, then frowned. "If the sheriff believes us, he will," Reese assured her. "And if he doesn't, we'll face that together too." For the first time since fleeing her marital home, Harper felt a flicker of hope for the future, not just of survival, but of happiness. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against Reese's. "Together," she echoed. The journey to Prescott took most of the following day. They rode Reese's 2 horses, Harper on the more docile mare, with Elijah's body secured to a makeshift travois. The winter sun provided little warmth, but the sky was clear, and the snow-covered landscape was beautiful in its stark simplicity. As they traveled, Harper found herself studying Reese's profile against the blue sky. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with bravado and everything to do with knowing his own mind. She wondered what it would be like to build a life with such a man, a true partnership, rather than the subjugation she had experienced with Elijah. They reached Prescott by late afternoon. The town was busier than Harper remembered, with wagons and horses crowding the muddy main street as the melting snow turned everything to slush. People stopped to stare as they rode past, Elijah's shrouded body drawing curious and alarmed looks. The sheriff's office was a solid brick building near the center of town. Sheriff Thomas Burke was a graying man with a weathered face and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He listened in silence as Reese explained the situation, from Harper's arrival at his cabin to Elijah's death. "So you're claiming self-defense," Sheriff Burke said when Reese had finished. Yes, sir, he had a gun to Mrs. Simmons's head. I had no choice. The sheriff turned to Harper. And you, madam, is this how you recall events? Harper nodded, touching the fading bruise on her cheek. Elijah was going to kill me, if not that day, then eventually. Mr. Callahan saved my life. Sheriff Burke studied her face, noting the bruise and the healing cut on her lip. Your husband do that to you? Yes. Not the first time, I take it. No, sir. The sheriff sighed heavily. I knew Elijah Simmons. Not well, but enough to know he had a temper, especially when he drank. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. There was a man in Tucson looking for him too, something about gambling debts. Harper wasn't surprised. Elijah had always been secretive about his finances. I'll need statements from both of you, Sheriff Burke continued, and I'll have Doc Miller examine the body to confirm your account of how he died. He fixed Reese with a stern look. In the meantime, I'll need you to stay in town, Mr. Callahan. No heading back to your cabin until this matter is settled. I understand, Reese said. Mrs. Simmons, the Jensen boarding house has rooms available. I suggest you take one for the night. Harper glanced at Reese, reluctant to be separated from him after everything they'd been through. I'd prefer to stay with Mr. Callahan, if possible. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. That wouldn't be proper, madam, not with your husband barely cold. Harper wanted to argue but knew it would only complicate matters. Of course, the boarding house will be fine. After giving their statements, Reese walked Harper to the Jensen boarding house, a well-maintained two-story building on a side street. I don't have enough money for a room, Harper whispered as they approached. Reese pressed several coins into her hand. Take this. It's enough for a few nights. Reese, I can't, please, he said quietly. Let me do this for you. I'll be at the Arizona hotel if you need anything. Harper reluctantly accepted the money. Do you think the sheriff believes us? I think so. Burke's a fair man. He'll investigate, but I believe he'll come to the right conclusion. Harper nodded, trying to draw strength from Reese's confidence. When will I see you again? I'll come by in the morning, Reese promised. We'll face whatever comes together, remember. Together, Harper echoed, the word a talisman against her fears. Reese hesitated, then leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Rest well, Harper. Harper watched him walk away, fighting the urge to call him back. Then she turned and entered the boarding house, prepared to face a long night alone with her thoughts. The room at the boarding house was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a chair by the window. Harper sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the events of the past week. She had fled her home, been rescued by a stranger, witnessed her husband's death, and now found herself alone in a town full of people who had known her as Mrs. Elijah Simmons. What would they think of her now? A widow under suspicious circumstances, potentially involved with another man mere days after her husband's death. The gossip would be vicious. But as she prepared for bed, Harper realized something surprising. She didn't care what they thought. For the first time in her adult life, she was truly free. Free from Elijah's cruelty, free from the constant fear. Whatever judgment the townspeople passed on her couldn't compare to what she had already endured. With that thought bringing unexpected peace, Harper slept better than she had in months. Morning brought a knock at her door. Harper opened it to find Mrs. Jensen, the boarding house proprietor, a plump woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. There's breakfast downstairs when you're ready, Mrs. Simmons, she said. And that cowboy of yours is waiting in the parlor. Harper blushed at the "your cowboy" remark but thanked Mrs. Jensen. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, where she found Reese sitting stiffly in a floral armchair that seemed too delicate for his frame. He stood when he saw her, and the warmth in his eyes made her heart flutter. "Morning. Did you sleep all right?" Better than expected, Harper replied. Any word from the sheriff? Doc Miller confirmed that Elijah died from a single rifle shot to the chest, consistent with our statements. Sheriff Burke wants to see us again this morning. They ate a quick breakfast, then walked to the sheriff's office. The streets were busy with morning activity, and Harper was acutely aware of the curious glances directed their way. News traveled fast in a small town like Prescott. Sheriff Burke was at his desk when they arrived, writing in a ledger. He looked up, gesturing for them to sit. Doc Miller's report confirms your account of the shooting, he said without preamble. And I've spoken with several people in town who knew Elijah Simmons. Seems he had quite a reputation for drinking and gambling. He turned to Harper. Mrs. Forrester at the general store mentioned that she'd noticed bruises on you more than once, though you always had explanations. Harper nodded, remembering the lies she'd told. I was ashamed. Understandable. The sheriff closed his ledger. Based on all the evidence and testimonies, I'm ruling Elijah Simmons's death as justified homicide in defense of another person. Mr. Callahan, you're free to go. Relief washed over Harper like a wave. Thank you, Sheriff. Don't thank me yet, madam, Sheriff Burke cautioned. You're a free woman now, legally speaking. But small towns have long memories. Your husband's only been dead a day. People will talk. Let them, Harper said with quiet dignity. The sheriff's mouth twitched in what might have been approval. I've arranged for Elijah to be buried today. As his widow, you have the right to attend. The thought of watching Elijah being lowered into the ground brought conflicting emotions. Part of Harper felt she should be there, if only for closure. Another part wanted nothing more to do with the man who had made her life a nightmare. I'll attend, she decided finally. It's the proper thing to do. Reese nodded his understanding. I'll go with you if you'd like. I would. The burial was a small, somber affair at the town cemetery. Besides Harper and Reese, only the preacher, the sheriff, and a handful of curious onlookers attended. The preacher said a few words over the simple pine coffin, but there was no eulogy, no fond remembrances. Elijah Simmons was laid to rest with the same coldness he had shown in life. As the first shovelful of dirt hit the coffin, Harper felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. It was over. Elijah could never hurt her again. After the burial, Harper and Reese walked slowly back toward town. The day had warmed enough that the snow was melting rapidly, turning the streets muddy and the air damp. What will you do now? Reese asked, breaking the contemplative silence. Harper considered the question. I don't know. I have no home, no money of my own. She looked up at him. What about you? Will you go back to your cabin? I thought I might, Reese said carefully. But I find I'm not in as much of a hurry to return to solitude as I once was. Harper's heart quickened. No, Reese stopped walking, turning to face her. Harper, I know this is fast, too fast probably. But these past days, getting to know you, protecting you, just being around you, it's made me realize how empty my life was before. Reese, let me finish, he said gently. I'm not asking for promises. I know you need time to heal, to find yourself again after everything Elijah took from you. But when you're ready, if you'd consider it, I'd like you to come back to the cabin with me, not as a guest, as a partner. The sincerity in his voice made Harper's eyes sting with tears. People would talk. They'd say terrible things about both of us. Let them, Reese said, echoing her earlier words. We know the truth. That's what matters. Harper studied his face, the earnest blue eyes, the strong lines of his jaw beneath the beard, the honesty written in every feature. This was a man who had risked his life for her when she was nothing to him but a stranger in need. A man who had offered protection without demanding anything in return. A man she was rapidly falling in love with. Yes, she said softly. Reese blinked. Yes. Yes, I'll come back to the cabin with you, as your partner." Harper reached for his hand. "I don't need time to know what I want, Reese. Life's too short and too precious to waste on what other people think." The smile that broke across Reese's face was like sunshine after a storm. He squeezed her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "There's a preacher in town," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Harper laughed softly. "Are you proposing to me, Reese Callahan?" "I believe I am, Harper Simmons." His expression grew serious. "I know we've only known each other a short time, but some things you just know. And I know that I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Harper thought of all the ways Elijah had made her doubt herself, made her feel small and worthless. And she thought of how Reese had seen her strength from the first moment, had treated her as an equal deserving of respect and protection. "Yes," she said again, more firmly this time. "I'll have you, Reese Callahan." They were married 3 days later in a small ceremony at the town church. Mrs. Jensen from the boarding house and Sheriff Burke served as witnesses. The preacher raised an eyebrow at the haste, especially given Harper's recent widowhood, but performed the ceremony without comment. Harper wore a simple blue dress borrowed from Mrs. Jensen's daughter, and Reese had purchased a new shirt for the occasion. It wasn't the elaborate wedding Harper had once dreamed of as a girl, but as she spoke her vows to Reese vows, she meant with all her heart she knew it was perfect in its simplicity. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared. "You may kiss your bride." Reese's kiss was gentle but full of promise, his hands warm and steady on her waist. When they parted, Harper saw the same joy in his eyes that filled her heart. "Mrs. Callahan," he murmured, the name sounding right in a way that Mrs. Simmons never had. They left Prescott the following morning, riding side by side toward the cabin that would now be their home. The snow had mostly melted, leaving the landscape in the first flush of early spring. The air was crisp and clear, carrying the scent of pine and possibility. "Are you ready for this?" Reese asked as the cabin came into view. "It's a hard life out here, lonely sometimes." Harper smiled at him, feeling a contentment she had never known before. "Not lonely anymore," she said. "And yes, I'm ready. More than ready." They dismounted in front of the cabin. Before Harper could move toward the door, Reese swept her into his arms. "Tradition," he explained with a grin, carrying her across the threshold. Harper laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I thought cowboys didn't hold with such fancies." "This one does," Reese replied, setting her down gently in the middle of the cabin, their cabin now. Harper looked around, seeing the space with new eyes. What had seemed Spartan before now held promise. A home they would build together, filling it with warmth and love and perhaps, someday, the laughter of children. Reese moved to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. "Welcome home, Harper Callahan." Harper leaned back against his solid chest, covering his hands with her own. "Home," she repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." Spring bloomed across the Arizona territory, bringing new growth and warmer days. Harper and Reese settled into a rhythm of shared work and companionship that deepened with each passing week. They expanded the garden, added chickens to their small homestead, and began work on an addition to the cabin. Their evenings were spent by the fire, talking, planning, and discovering each other in ways both innocent and passionate. Harper learned that Reese had a surprising talent for whittling, creating delicate wooden animals and birds that began to populate the cabin's shelves. Reese discovered that Harper could sing beautifully, and would often ask her to share songs she remembered from her childhood. In May, they made a trip to Prescott for supplies. The town's reaction to their marriage had mellowed somewhat, though there were still whispers and sidelong glances. Harper held her head high, Reese's hand firm in hers as they walked the streets that had once filled her with dread, At the general store, Mrs. Forrester greeted them with cautious warmth. "Mrs. Callahan, you're looking well. Marriage agrees with you, I see." "It does, Mrs. Forrester," Harper replied with a genuine smile, "when it's to the right man." The older woman's expression softened. "I'm glad to hear it, dear. Too many women don't get a second chance at happiness." As they gathered their supplies, Sheriff Burke entered the store. He nodded to them both. "Mr. and Mrs. Callahan, good to see you." "Sheriff," Reese greeted. "How are things in town?" "Quiet for the most part, though we had some excitement last week when the stage was held up just outside of town." Harper tensed. "Was anyone hurt?" "No, just shaken up. The bandits got away with the strongbox, but we've got a posse tracking them." The sheriff eyed Reese speculatively. "Could use a man with your tracking skills if you're interested in earning some extra money." Reese glanced at Harper, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, knowing that the additional income would help them through the coming winter. "I could spare a few days," Reese told the sheriff. "When do you need me?" "Posse is heading out again tomorrow morning. Think you could be ready? We'll stay in town tonight," Harper suggested. The Jensen boarding house should have a room. Plans were made, and the next morning Harper stood on the porch of the boarding house, watching as Reese prepared to ride out with the posse. He wore his gun belt low on his hips, a bandana around his neck, looking every inch the capable frontiersman she had come to love. "Be careful," she said as he mounted his horse. "Always am." Reese leaned down from the saddle, cupping her cheek in his calloused hand. "I'll be back before you know it." "You'd better be," Harper replied with a smile that didn't quite hide her concern. "I'll be waiting." The 5 days of Reese's absence were the longest of Harper's life. She spent them helping Mrs. Jensen at the boarding house to keep busy, but her thoughts were constantly with Reese, wondering if he was safe, if he was warm enough, if he was thinking of her too. On the 6th day, just as Harper was beginning to truly worry, the posse returned. They rode down the main street in a cloud of dust, tired but triumphant. Sheriff Burke led the way, followed by his deputies and the volunteers, including Reese. Harper ran from the boarding house, not caring who saw or what they thought. Reese dismounted just in time to catch her in his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "You're safe," she breathed, inhaling the familiar scent of him beneath the dust and sweat of the trail. "Told you I'd be back," he murmured into her hair. "Couldn't stay away from you if I tried." They spent one more night in town, celebrating with the rest of the posse at the Prescott saloon. The reward money was divided among the volunteers, with Reese receiving a generous portion that would see them comfortably through the winter and allow them to complete the cabin addition sooner than planned. The next morning, they rode home, eager to return to the life they were building together. As the cabin came into view, Harper felt a surge of contentment so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. "Harper," Reese asked, concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she assured him, wiping her eyes with a laugh. "Nothing at all, I'm just happy, truly happy." Reese's smile was tender as he reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "Me too." Summer passed in a blur of hard work and sweet evenings. The cabin addition was completed by August, adding a proper bedroom and a small parlor to their home. Harper planted flowers around the porch, and Reese built a rocking chair where she could sit in the evenings, watching the sunset over the distant mountains. In September, Harper confirmed what she had begun to suspect. She was expecting their first child. She waited until dinner to tell Reese, watching his face as the news sank in. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. "We're having a baby," Harper nodded, her hands protectively over her still flat stomach. "In the spring. Are you happy about it?" Reese was around the table in an instant, lifting her from her chair and spinning her in a circle. "Happy?" "Harper, I've never been happier in my life." He set her down carefully, suddenly concerned. "Should I not have done that? I don't want to hurt the baby." Harper laughed, overwhelmed by his joy. "The baby's fine. We're both fine." That night, as they lay in bed, Reese's hand rested protectively over Harper's abdomen. "I never thought I'd have this," he confessed quietly. "A wife, a child on the way, a real family. After my parents died, I figured I'd always be alone." Harper covered his hand with her own. "You'll never be alone again, Reese. I promise." The winter of 1885–1886 was one of the harshest in memory. Snow piled high around the cabin and freezing winds howled down from the mountains. But inside, Harper and Reese were warm and content, preparing for the arrival of their child and dreaming of the future. Reese was fiercely protective of Harper as her pregnancy progressed, insisting on doing the heavier chores and making sure she rested often. Harper tolerated his hovering with good-natured patience, knowing it came from love. They celebrated Christmas with simple gifts they had made for each other: a new shawl Harper had knitted for herself from soft wool, a handcrafted cradle Reese had been working on in secret for the baby, and small tokens of affection that meant more than store-bought luxuries ever could. "Next Christmas, there will be 3 of us," Harper said as they sat by the fire on Christmas night, wrapped in a quilt Reese's mother had made years ago. "3 Callahans," Reese agreed, his voice filled with pride. "A family." February brought a brief thaw, allowing Reese to make a much-needed trip to Prescott for supplies. Harper, now in her 7th month, remained at the cabin, promising to take it easy while he was gone. The journey would take 3 days at most, given the condition of the trails. On the 2nd day of Reese's absence, Harper woke to the sound of horses approaching. Thinking Reese had returned early, she hurried to the window, only to freeze at the sight of 3 unfamiliar riders dismounting in front of the cabin. Harper's hand went instinctively to her rounded belly. She moved quickly to the corner where Reese kept a shotgun loaded for emergencies, just as a heavy knock sounded at the door. "Who's there?" she called, the shotgun steady in her hands. "Madam, my name's Frank Miller. My brothers and I are looking for shelter, got caught in the weather." Harper hesitated. The code of the frontier demanded hospitality to travelers, especially in winter. But she was alone, vulnerable and responsible not just for herself but for her unborn child. "I'm sorry, but my husband isn't home," she replied. "There's an abandoned line shack about 2 miles east of here. You'll find firewood stacked inside." There was a murmured conversation outside then. "Madam, my youngest brother's sick with fever. He won't make it another 2 miles. We just need a place by the fire for the night. We'll be gone by morning." Harper peered through a crack in the curtains. She could see 3 men, 2 standing, one slumped in the saddle, looking genuinely ill. Her conscience warred with her caution. "I have a shotgun," she warned, "and I know how to use it." "Yes, madam, we mean no harm. Just seeking Christian charity." After another moment's hesitation, Harper made her decision. "I'll open the door. Keep your distance and keep your hands where I can see them." She unbolted the door, keeping the shotgun visible as she stepped back. 3 men entered, one in his 40s with a weathered face, another in his 30s with a similar look, and a younger man who couldn't have been more than 20, pale and shivering with fever. "Thank you, madam," the eldest said, removing his hat. "I'm Frank Miller. These are my brothers, James and William." Harper nodded, not lowering the shotgun. "You can stay until morning. Your brother can rest by the fire. There's stew in the pot if you're hungry." The Millers were polite and kept their distance as promised, helping their youngest brother to a pallet near the hearth. Harper maintained her vigilance, the shotgun never far from reach. By evening, she had relaxed slightly, though she remained wary. "When's your baby due, madam?" Frank asked as they ate supper. April, Harper replied, surprised by the question. My wife's expecting our fourth, Frank said with a proud smile. Can't wait to get back to her in Flagstaff. The conversation turned to families and homesteading, and Harper found herself enjoying the company despite her initial fears. William's fever had broken by nightfall, and he sat up to eat a little broth, thanking Harper for her kindness. You've been more than generous, James told her. Most wouldn't take in strangers these days, especially not a woman alone. The frontier demands certain courtesies, Harper replied. But I'll still be keeping this close by, she added, patting the shotgun. The Millers laughed appreciatively, and Harper allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps she had judged them too harshly. That night, Harper slept lightly, waking at every sound. But the Millers caused no trouble, and by dawn they were preparing to leave as promised. We've left some fresh coffee on the stove, madam, Frank said as they gathered their things. And James trapped some rabbits last night. They're cleaned and ready for your pot. Thank you, Harper said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Safe travels to you. And to your husband when he returns, Frank replied, tipping his hat. You've got a fine place here. After they had gone, Harper sat in her rocking chair, one hand on her belly where the baby kicked vigorously, as if approving of her decisions. She smiled, thinking how proud Reese would be of how she had handled the situation. Reese returned that afternoon, his pack horses laden with supplies. Harper met him on the porch, her face lighting up at the sight of him. You'll never believe what happened while you were gone, she said as he dismounted and took her in his arms. Tell me everything, he replied, leading her inside as the first snowflakes of a new storm began to fall. That evening, as they unpacked the supplies and Reese told her about his trip to town, Harper felt a deep contentment settle over her. Their life wasn't easy. The frontier demanded resilience and hard work, but it was rich with love and purpose. Sheriff Burke asked about you, Reese mentioned as they prepared for bed. Said to tell you hello. Harper smiled, remembering how the sheriff had been one of the few to treat her with dignity during the difficult days after Elijah's death. That was kind of him. The whole town's curious about you, actually. The mysterious Mrs. Callahan who tamed the solitary trapper. Harper laughed softly. Is that what they're saying? That I tamed you? Reese pulled her close, his hand resting on the swell of her belly. You did something better than taming me, Harper. You made me whole. The remainder of the winter passed peacefully, the cabin a warm haven against the cold. Harper's pregnancy progressed without complications, though as her due date approached, Reese grew increasingly nervous about the distance to town and the lack of a doctor nearby. Mrs. Jensen was a midwife before she opened the boarding house, Harper reminded him. I'll be fine, Reese. But what if something goes wrong? What if Harper silenced his worries with a kiss? Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, often in far worse conditions than this. Have faith in me. As it happened, their child decided to arrive 2 weeks early, on a clear April morning when the snow had mostly melted and the first wildflowers were beginning to bloom in the meadow. Harper woke Reese before dawn, her voice calm despite the pain. It's time. Reese was instantly alert, his face a mixture of excitement and terror. The baby's coming. Now, should I ride for town? There's no time for that, Harper said, breathing through a contraction. This baby isn't waiting. The next 12 hours were a blur of pain, determination, and finally, overwhelming joy as their son entered the world with a lusty cry that seemed to fill the cabin. He's perfect, Reese whispered, tears streaming unashamed down his face as he held his son for the first time. Harper, he's absolutely perfect. They named him Thomas James Callahan Thomas, after Harper's father, James after Reese's. He had Harper's dark hair and Reese's blue eyes, a combination they both agreed was the finest in the territory. The weeks following Thomas's birth were a whirlwind of adjustment as they learned to be parents. Reese proved to be a natural father, as gentle with his son as he was strong in protecting his family. Harper watched them together, Reese cradling Thomas while telling him stories of the mountains. Thomas gazing up with solemn blue eyes, and felt her heart could burst with love. Summer came, bringing with it the first anniversary of Harper and Reese's meeting. They celebrated quietly, reminiscing about the desperate chase through the snow that had brought them together and the unlikely love that had blossomed in its wake. "I never thought I'd be grateful for Elijah's cruelty," Harper mused as they sat on the porch, Thomas sleeping peacefully in her arms. "But if I hadn't run that day, if you hadn't been here." "Some things are meant to be," Reese said, taking her free hand in his, "even if the path getting there is hard." "Do you believe that we were meant to find each other?" Reese considered the question seriously. "I believe that life gives us choices, and sometimes, if we're brave enough to make the right ones, we find more happiness than we ever thought possible." He squeezed her hand. "You were brave that day, Harper, brave enough to run, brave enough to trust a stranger. And I'll spend the rest of my life being worthy of that trust." As the sun set over their homestead, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Harper leaned against Reese's shoulder, their son cradled between them. From desperate flight through snow to this moment of perfect peace, it was a journey she would never have imagined for herself, but one she wouldn't trade for all the safety and comfort in the world. "I love you, Reese Callahan," she said softly. "And I love you, Harper Callahan," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Now and always." In the years that followed, the Callahan homestead flourished. They added a proper barn and expanded their herds, gradually transforming the trapper's cabin into a thriving small ranch. Thomas grew into a strong, curious boy with his father's quiet confidence and his mother's gentle heart. He was joined by a sister, Emma, 3 years later, and another brother, Samuel, 2 years after that. Harper and Reese's reputation in Prescott evolved from scandalous to respected as they proved themselves hardworking, generous neighbors who never turned away a traveler in need. The story of how they met, of Reese claiming Harper from her abusive husband with the words, "She's mine now," became something of a local legend, romanticized and embellished with each telling. On winter evenings, when snow blanketed the land and their children begged for stories, Harper would sometimes tell a carefully edited version of how she and their father had found each other. The children loved the tale of the brave cowboy who rescued the lady in distress, though they didn't yet understand the true courage it had taken for both Harper and Reese to choose love in the face of danger and judgment. "And did Papa really say she's mine now?" Emma would ask, her eyes wide with wonder. "He did," Harper would confirm, smiling at Reese across the room. "But what he meant was that I was safe, that I had found a home." "And have you lived happily ever after?" Thomas would ask, already knowing the answer but wanting to hear it again. Harper would look at her family, at Reese, still handsome and strong after all these years, at her children, healthy and happy, at the home they had built together from nothing but love and determination, and her heart would fill with gratitude for that desperate flight through the snow that had led her to her true destiny. "Yes," she would tell her children, her voice soft with certainty, "we have indeed lived happily ever after," and it was true. Not because their life was perfect or without challenges, but because they faced each day together, with the same courage and trust that had brought them through that fateful winter so many years ago. From strangers to saviors to soul mates, theirs was a love born in desperation but nurtured in choice, growing stronger with each passing season. In a land where survival itself was often in question, Harper and Reese Callahan had found something rare and precious: a love as vast as the Arizona sky, as enduring as the mountains, and as real as the earth beneath their feet. A love that had begun with a chase through the snow and a declaration of protection, and had blossomed into a lifetime of joy. A love that was, in every sense that mattered, meant to be.